What are the specifications? Whenever we want to go to market, we will ask for a product, what is the specification? If we are buying a TV, we will ask what are the specifications. If we are buying any electronic gadget, we will ask. Similarly, when we are buying a computer, they will ask what processor you want. Whether you want i3 processor, i5 processor, i7 processor, i9 processor. If it is i3 processor, it is having which generation, whether 3rd generation or 5th generation or 7th generation. So processor specification is very much important. That will reduce the cost if you are taking the low end processor, and that will also decide whether that processor is suitable for our application or not. Now whatever the processors we are discussing, these are Pentium processors. So Pentium 1, 2, 3, 4 processors. In Pentium 1 process, the clock speed initially 50 MHz. Later it increased to 60 MHz, 100 MHz and 133 MHz. And the voltage, the CPU is supplying the voltage with which it can run the components. In Pentium 1 processors 5 volts and the next 3.3, 3.3. Now in Arduino board also we will have two voltages. One is for 5 volts and second one is 3.3 voltage port. And similarly RAM. All these Pentium 1 to 4 processors, they are having 4 GB RAM support. We discussed only some part to understand what are the specifications. Now we will deal with what are these specifications. First one is clock speed. When a CPU is communicating with the components on the motherboard, it is important to us at what rate it is communicating. How many instructions are being processed in 1 second. That is known as clock speed. Generally the clock speed ranges from megahertz to gigahertz. 10 to the power 6 instructions are being processed in single second. 10 to the power 9 instructions are being processed in single second, gigahertz. That is clock speed. More clock speed means the processor is running very fastly. More clock speed means the processor is running very fastly and efficiently it is handling the data with the other components on the motherboard. Data bus width. How many number of, we told already, whenever the CPU is communicating with the components on the motherboard, it is communicating with the data. When the data flow is there, how many bits of data can be flown from CPU to other components at a time? That is known as data bus width. Maximum data bus width means we can handle more number of bits at a time. Okay. Next, internal register. If it is having 64 internal registers, then we will call it as a 64-bit processor. If it is having 32 internal registers, means we are saying it is a 32-bit processor. Generally, whenever we download some apps in the Windows system, it used to ask whether it is a 32-bit processor or 64-bit processor. They will develop the application for both processors. And the operation of the application is different for the 32-bit processor and 64-bit processor. If you download the 64-bit processor on a 32-bit processor, if you have downloaded 64-bit processor application on a 32-bit processor, then that application will not work. So that's why they specify whether it is 32-bit processor application or 64-bit processor application. Okay. Next, address bus width. What is the maximum amount of memory the CPU can address at a time? That can be known by using the address bus width. Next is maximum memory. How many RAMs CPU can handle at a time? Sir, only 4 slots are given to me, but I want to use some 100 slots. You can use 100 slots, but the CPU cannot understand, because the capability of the CPU is to only understand the RAMs in the 4 slots. It is not like the PCI slots. We can add the external peripheral devices, but we cannot add 100 RAMs on a single board. So that maximum memory it handles, that can be known by using this. And how many number of cores we are using? What is core? One part of the processor we are keeping reserved, and we are saying like one part of memory we are keeping in the RAM reserved and calling as a cache. Is cache is different from RAM? No. Same memory in the RAM we are reserving and we are saying cache. Similarly, Some part of the processor we are reserving and we are saying it as a core. We are handling some important instructions. So if we are using only one core and it is a single core processor. If you are using two cores, then it is a dual core processor. If you are using four cores, then it is a quad core processor. Okay. Next, working voltage, whether it is operating on 5 volts or 3.3 volts. Next, how many number of transistors it is handling. Handling means processor is made up of transistors because it is after all a semiconductor device. So how many transistors it can handle? In nowadays, if you take the mobile processor Snapdragon, it is made up of crores of transistors in a single chip. That is the power of the semiconductor. What is the heat the processor is generating? On the processor we will have the fan, CPU fan. If you open the motherboard, on the CPU we will have one fan. Why we are giving fan only to the processor? Because it is very important. It should not get heated up. We are using these many number of transistors. Definitely heat will be generated. So what is the maximum amount of heat that is being generated such that I have to cool down? Accordingly, my computer will work. These are the specifications of the processor. So clock speed, it is telling how many instructions per 1 second the CPU can process. Data bus width, how many bits when the CPU is processing with some other component, when it is communicating, how many bits it can communicate at a time. That can be known by using the number of bits that are flowing from CPU to the communicated component. The internal register, if we are using a 32-bit register, then it is a 32-bit processor. If you are using a 64-bit register, then it is a 64-bit processor. The maximum amount of memory the CPU can address is known as address bus width. Maximum RAMs it can handle can be known by using the maximum memory. Number of cores, if you are using one core, then it is a single core processor. If you are using two cores, then it is a dual core processor. If you are using four cores, then it is a... What is the working voltage and how many transistors you are using and what is the maximum heat it is generating such that we have to cool it down. These specifications when you know, then you can understand what requirements my CPU is having, what requirements I can handle, in what situation I can keep my computer.